Picture this, coming to a new house, only to discover that there are many things that you never knew about the place. This is exactly what one TikTok user, Carly, realized when her grandmother moved into a house previously owned by a doomsday prepper. Carly, in her tour, which garnered massive traffic on social media platforms, pointed at a fake pipe, which opened a secret basement full of canned foods, a massive safe, masks, and even bunk beds. This house somehow seemed to be taken straight out of one of the apocalypse films. Another shocker was behind a fake electric panel, a vice chamber that had a latch to isolate oneself in case of the last doomsday. Dusty gas masks, a water pump, and canned foods piled up on the shelves gave an impression that the owner was expecting some disaster. However, some people found the idea of the bunker to be a homely one, while others uncomfortably associated this idea of being suffocated in such a confined space, which seemed really claustrophobic. Since bunkers became in demand during the unstable periods, and even more so after the COVID-19 pandemic, this find raises questions. It seems like this house was just a backup plan for the perverted prepper, or was there something much more sinister lurking behind the walls? What would you do if you found this secret shelter in your house? Would you choose to hide it or spread the word? In 2017, authorities in Dutchess County, New York, made a chilling discovery. 7 live sandbar sharks living in an above-ground pool in the basement of Joshua Seguin's residence. Former State Representative Seguin had been arrested earlier for possessing 5 small sharks in his truck, thus leading investigators to his home. In addition to the live sharks, authorities discovered carcasses of 2 leopard sharks, a hammerhead, and an endangered small-toothed sawfish in the Marseille Aquarium. Well, Seguin had been selling these sharks in the black market to interested clients who enjoy having unique pets around. The purchase of sharks without permits is prohibited, and it emerged that Seguin was not only risking his own life as well as those of the animals, but also contravening wildlife conservation laws. The case brought to light the highly organized black market in protected and exotic sea creatures, and those who sought to acquire these animals because of prestige associated with ownership. However, Seguin was charged $5,000 after he had pleaded guilty. This sinister operation not only exposed a gross side of the illicit business of wildlife trade, but also provided a clue into how large this market has become. Many species of sharks, which are significant inhabitants in the ocean habitat, were converted into mere objects for economic gains. The idea of these beautiful animals crowded around an above-ground pool in a basement is all at once angering as it is saddening. In this light, the story is a caution about those who are willing to go so far to meet the demand in black market, and one gets to ask how many other basements might hide the secret of the ocean. Imagine walking into a cozy bar in the heart of Phoenix. You order a drink and decide to explore the place. Descending down the stairs into the basement of this bar, you come around a grotesque sight behind the wired fence. 14 dolls are placed on a large table, where each doll is depicted as if it is busy playing a game on a table full of scrambled coins. You can call the table full of coins as an unusual sacrifice, or a setting similar to that of a shrine. The dolls look as if they were performing a ritual, which became frozen in time. This makes the scene quite ominous. Their eyes stare deathly. It almost feels like they are following your gaze and perhaps monitoring you. These dolls were not intended to remain there for very long. Accidentally left behind when art purchaser Carl Kopp put up creepy figures as part of an art installation intended to be temporary at Hanny's. Later, they became a fixture, welcoming patrons filled with curiosity and, in many cases, uneasiness. No one knows how many of these dolls were found in the basement, among other things, or how many have gone missing to date. It has even been reported that employees and customers contribute to the dolls' collection, and that some of the dolls have been seen to disappear mysteriously. Is Hanny's haunted? The dolls contribute to the legend that has surrounded those creepy things. Or maybe it's really just one's imagination, or there really exists something beyond the ordinary. Either way, next time you are enjoying a cocktail, be it a martini, somewhere across the bar lies one of the eerie basement collections in Phoenix. And if you're courageous enough, do try to take a look at Hanny's, as it lies the border between art and the uncanny, and every corner has its tale. Are you ready to challenge the mystery of these walls? In the year of 1998, a horrific sight was unveiled in the Benjamin Franklin House in London. In the course of the work, more than 1,200 bones of human beings were discovered in the building's basement, some of which are more than 200 years old. This gory discovery immediately raised eyebrows on one of the America founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, who resided in the house for close to 16 years while in London. Indeed, it was not Franklin himself who was in charge of these human remains, but his closest friend and comrade, Dr. William Hewson, an anatomist. It is reported that Dr. Hewson was married to Franklin's landlady's daughter, and in the middle of the 18th century, this man successfully managed an anatomy school, where he made dissections and studies of human corpses. During the 1700s, the science of medicine was not advanced when it came to human anatomy, but there were rules on human embalming. Hewson and such medical students/surgeons relied on grave robbers, who procured cadavers for dissection, an activity that was illegal and highly risky. The penalty for possession of black market bodies was steep, and consequently, one had to cover up original work with such sources. In December 2009, bones discovered in the building that once belonged to Franklin included bones of children, some of which exhibited saw marks that indicated the remains had been used for dissection. These remains were buried under the floor, and it seems that Hewson tried to conceal them in order to avoid arrest for his highly questionable medical practice. The bones discovered in Franklin's basement were probably parts of his victims' bodies after the dissections were conducted in order to bury the remains to escape the law. A man of science himself, Franklin certainly could have been obliviously blind to the dissections happening in his very home. There are no historical facts linking him directly to the procedure. It is more believable to assume that Franklin, being associated with many top scientists and doctors of the Enlightenment, saw Hewson's work as a progression of medical science at the price of being dark and criminal. Finding out that there are such bones evokes the dark and unconscious aspects of the medical life of the 18th century, when surgeons and anatomists had to extrapolate rather than search for bodies for dissections. Grave ramping became synonymous with theft, and the number of corpses in demand greatly dwarfed the legal number, of which there was supply in the form of criminals who were executed. Hewson, like others of his generation, probably had little choice but to indulge in this illicit trade if his work and that of training future surgeons were to continue. Most of these people, whose lives were taken and bodies violated for scientific purposes, are not easily identifiable, providing some eerie to the tale. The bones were then analyzed and determined to belong to the time Franklin and Hewson lived in the house, and corresponds to historical data that put up Hewson's anatomy school at that time. While learning about this may be uncomfortable, it gives a peek into the clandestine and sometimes heinous realm of 18th century medical research. The Benjamin Franklin House, converted into a museum today, contains a brief on this unglory chapter in its history, while celebrating Franklin's ideas and contribution, along with the revolutionary architecture beneath his feet. Archie Graham Palmer and his wife Philippa went down the basement of their new house in search of forgotten treasures, when in fact they came across a genuine time capsule, a totally intact Victorian kitchen. Its dust-laden interiors had the couples walking into a wonderful sight of beautifully carved cupboards, whose craftsmanship, though belonging to the pre-World War era, was still clearly visible. Something had to give. The smell of cigars, mixed with the stench of historical dust crept into the air, evoked the rich aroma of Victorian time cooking. This part of the house in the basement stood frozen in time, to give them the peek into how their ancestors lived. As they looked around the kitchen, Archie and Philippa noticed the range of vintage utensils. In one corner, a great rounded cast iron stove was installed, and even though thick layers of dust had settled all around, its shiny black body was easily visible. They looked at the Victorian utensils on the walls, which included copper pots and other pans, wooden spoons, china plates, complete with cutleries, all bearing floral designs that imitate the Victorian age. The couple could not prevent themselves from visualizing the lot of activities that used to go on in the kitchen. They painted a picture of how women would take time to prepare their family's meal, elegantly dressed with sounds of joy and words spreading all over. Every artifact was a history in itself, and they got lost into the history they were surrounded with. The kitchen was no longer an ordinary room. It became a living reminiscence of the hard work that was put to ensure that a meal was made, when cooking was a form of art. The couple also found a large wooden table in the corner, somewhat chipped all over but strong enough, which must have been used to host large families during meals. On it lay a torn and aged cookbook, one that had been written by hand, showing all the traditional recipes. In Victorian houses, the kitchen was not just a discovery, it became a project for Archie and Philippa to continue the traditions of their forefathers. They got down to repairing the kitchen to reach its original condition. The artifacts were washed and fixed in this place, with efforts made to keep this part of history safe. A bomb squad was deployed to a residential area of Toluca, Mexico, when construction workers digging a basement found an unexploded military torpedo. Originally, what seemed to be just another day of life greatly escalated the situation into terror and fear almost immediately. On constructing the site, the construction team stumbled upon the torpedo while scrutinizing some parts of the area that required renovation. When they realized the object can be lethal, they grew concerned and decided to contact the authorities. This discovery drew more concern over the life of the crew, but also a shock that the existence of such an explosive relic could lie under a home. People waited calmly, watching the bomb squad, as curiosity mixed with fear in their eyes. The military torpedo sparked some gossip over its background. Was it a remnant of an old war, or was it hidden in the house for the past years? Lingering questions were just, as the mystery that surrounded the finding of the new star. The bomb squad carefully weighed the possibilities and acted cautiously to secure the area, and checked whether the torpedo was a threat to those within the neighborhood. After the analysis of the bomb squad, it turned out that there was no danger, and the torpedo was indeed a relic from the past. It could have been left on the land after military exercises, or perhaps a conflict. The diligent work of the crew helped to ensure the removal of the torpedo safely, putting everyone at ease. Every time you take a step down the stairs that lead to the Paris catacombs, you get this eerie feeling. The light is on and only glows faintly, and the shadows falls heavily on the damp walls. The stench of the earth and decay embraces the air indeed, a reminder of the victims of the city above that were buried deep under. Originally built as limestone quarries, these tunnels were redesigned in the last half of the 18th century and used as graveyards for more than 6 million Parisians. As you walk in the catacombs, each step gives you a glimpse of yesterdays. Existing right beneath the streets of Paris are a dark and expansive network called the catacombs that were constructed in late 1700s due to high populations of the dead in cemeteries. As more bodies started to overcrowd graveyards in Paris, then the bones were moved to underground limestone quarries. The first removals were carried from 1785 to 1787. The affair concerned the biggest burying ground in Paris, the Cemetery of Saint Innocents, which closed in 1780, having served for almost 10 centuries. By 1786, the tombs, common graves, and charnel house were stripped of bones, which were carted off at night to avert the wrath of frightened Parisian people and the church. The bones were thrown into 2 quarry wells and then conveyed and stacked to the galleries by the quarrymen. They were made after the French Revolution up to 1814. With the closure of the parochial burial grounds including Saint Eustache, Saint Nicolas des Champs, and the Bernardines convent in Paris. According to history, more than 6 million bones have been deposited at the catacombs. The pile of skulls and bones currently providing the themed attraction of a tourist destination helps the client to contemplate on the aspects of life and death in a historic city. Every wall is filled with the skulls and bones perfectly stacked and placed to make some artistic formation. It's inspiring and terrifying at the same time. The further you advance, a creeping sensation starts to appear that spirits of the dead might be following you. Some of the visitors have also complained of hearing strange noises and seeing lights that flash at the catacombs, thus making the place even more mystical towards its visitors. The legends which revolve around these catacombs makes the visitors' visit here more exciting. Here, the line between life and death is a thin one. Each moment you are alive, you are reminded how easily it could all end. Every single bone represents something. Every single shadow is a memory that has to be revealed. As you are about to go back to the hustle and bustle of the streets of Paris, just consider what you have seen. The catacombs express the message of the transient nature of life, emphasizing the bond that the living have with the dead. As part of the collapsing world, the catacombs present the possibility of other spine-chilling secrets lurking behind all these bones. This find enriches Shropshire history with a new chapter which sheds light on life in 12th century England. The discovery raises questions. Who built this chapel? Who was it a secret from? And why was it ever called Forget-Me-Not? The presence of the structures raises questions of what other secrets could be hidden beneath the soils. The astonishing find was made in 2010, during a regular family gathering in the village of Shropshire, when the Farley family. They stumbled upon a secret church that had been camouflaged secret for more than 200 years. The investigation started after they took out a metal grid that they did not know how ended up in the basement. They discovered below it a tiny, creepy chamber with benches made of bricks along its walls and a rusty wooden cross. Old bottles, newspapers, and magazines of the 1930s, hooks hanging from the ceiling. It hence created curiosity that prompted the family to seek more information about the chapel. Researchers believe that the room was likely a discreet Catholic chapel in Elizabethan England, where practicing Catholicism was prohibited. Because Catholics were a secret, hidden chapels or priest holes were required, and this closet may have been used as a place of escape through religious persecutions in the 1700s. There is another possibility that it was built up as a war bunker during the Second World War, because underground bunkers were constructed for secret movements against fascists. To think that this mysterious place lay a couple of stairs from the chapel led to a cupboard in the family's dining room, a passage that remained secret for years. The Farley family had been using it to store everyday items of their home and was completely unaware of the historic room below this. This amazing find brings up thoughts about other hidden history beneath our homes. As we come to an end of these spooky, strange, and fascinating stories, the cliché of unresolved enigma remains in the air. Delving into the forgotten, abandoned, and even forbidden places of our cities, these stories are peculiar and reminding us of how much history is lurking a few steps beneath our feet. These stories make you wonder about the difference between history and the present and the mystery of the unknown. What other mysteries might still remain hidden?